You know the feeling. You sit down to rest and almost immediately something pulls at you. Maybe it's your phone. Maybe it's the thought of food you don't really need. Maybe it's an old conversation you keep returning to, turning it over, looking for a different ending. You weren't unhappy a moment ago, but now there is this small, insistent wanting, and you can't quite say what it's for. Most of the time we let it pass. We pick up the phone or we don't. The feeling subsides. Life continues. But occasionally you catch yourself mid-reach and you wonder, not with alarm, just quietly, where does all this wanting come from? And why doesn't naming it seem to help? These are not new questions. People have been sitting with them for as long as people have sat with anything. One man sat with them longer than most. He lived in North Africa in the 4th and 5th centuries. He was brilliant and restless and, for much of his life, spectacularly unable to stop wanting things. He eventually became one of the most influential Christian thinkers who ever lived. His name was Augustine of Hippo. And here is the strange thing about him. He desired God more than anything else on earth. But he could only reach that desire by burning through every other love he had first. His holiness and his wreckage were the same story. There is a garden in North Africa. The year is around 370. A boy of 16 climbs a wall at night with his friends. On the other side is a pear tree. The pears are not especially good. The boys are not especially hungry. They strip the tree anyway, laugh, and throw most of the fruit to some pigs nearby. Then they go home. It sounds like nothing. Augustine would spend the rest of his life trying to understand why he did it. Not the act, the wanting. He did not want the pears. He wanted the wanting. He wanted the heat of it, the small lawlessness, the feeling of being alive inside a risk taken with other people. The fruit was almost beside the point. Think about that for a moment. Think of something you have wanted badly, not something trivial, but something that mattered. A person, a recognition, an outcome you told yourself would change things. Now ask yourself honestly, did you want the thing or did you want what the wanting did to you, the identity it gave you, the aliveness that came from reaching? Sit with that before we go further, because Augustine sat with it for decades, and what he found was not comfortable. Move forward a few years. Augustine is in his early 20s. He is in Carthage, sharp and ambitious, and he has a friend, a man he grew up with, whose name he never records. This friend gets sick. He is baptized while unconscious. He recovers briefly. Augustine jokes with him about the baptism, expecting him to laugh it off. The friend does not laugh. Then he dies, and Augustine collapses. He writes later that he felt his own soul had been torn in two. He could not stay in the town where they had walked together. He could not bear the places that remembered the friend. The grief was total. But here is the thing that troubled him. He could not tell whether he had loved the man or loved the feeling of being loved by him. Whether the friendship had been about the friend at all or about what Augustine became when he was seen by him. The loss did not clarify the love. It complicated it. It made him suspect the love itself. Now move again. Augustine is in his 30s. He is in Milan. He has a woman. She has been with him for over a decade. She has given him a son. He does not record her name either, which is its own kind of wound in the historical record. His mother, Monica, has arranged a respectable marriage for him, a girl from the right family, too young to wed yet. And so the woman he has lived with is sent away, gone. Augustine writes that his heart was cut and bleeding. He writes that she went back to Africa vowing never to be with another man. And what does he do? He takes another mistress while he waits for the arranged marriage to be possible. He knows this is not right. He says he cannot stop. He prays, and here the contradiction lives in a single sentence, one he will write down years later. He knew even then what he was made for. He could say it. He could feel the pull of it, and he could not go there yet. That is not hypocrisy exactly. It is something harder to name. His desire for God was real. His desire for everything else was also real. And naming one desire as higher did not make the lower ones disappear. It just made him aware of the distance between where he was and where he believed he was supposed to be. This is the man we are following, not a saint arriving. A man on fire, burning through one love after another, each one leaving a residue, grief, guilt, longing that he could not fully account for. The question he was living was not, "What should I want?" He already had an answer to that. The question was something older and stranger. If you name a desire as disordered, does it go away? Or does it simply go underground and keep moving? Think of a time you made a decision, a clean, clear decision. You said, "I am done wanting that." Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was the approval of someone whose good opinion you knew perfectly well meant almost nothing. You said the words to yourself. You meant them. And then you woke up the next morning and the wanting was still there, unchanged, patient, as if it had not heard you at all. Sit with that gap for a moment, the gap between what you resolved and what you continued to feel. Augustine spent his entire life in that gap, not studying it from a distance, living in it. That gap was, for him, the central wound of being human. He believed with everything he had that desire was not a problem to be eliminated. It was the engine of the soul. You are what you love. That was not a metaphor for him. It was a description of how a person is built. Take away desire entirely and you do not have a purified self. You have no self at all. A will that wants nothing is not free. It is simply dead. And yet, desire left to itself, desire without direction, without order, that was where the damage happened. He had watched it in himself. He had loved brilliance more than truth. He had loved being loved more than being good. He had loved restlessness because it felt like depth. Each of those loves had felt from inside like the real thing. That is what made them dangerous, not that they were obviously wrong, but that they were so nearly right. So here is the wound. You cannot have a self without desire, and desire left to itself will disorder the self. These two things are both true at once. There is no clean exit from that. He did not find the answer in willpower. That much he was certain of. You are standing in front of the thing you have decided to stop wanting. You have made your resolution. You are resolute, and the pull is still there. What do you do now? Do you resolve harder? He tried that. It did not hold. The will, he said, could point, but it could not carry you.
Will is to grace as the horse is to the rider.
The horse can be strong. The horse can want to go. But without the rider, the horse does not know where it is going. And the horse cannot put the rider on its own back. That image cost him something to arrive at. It meant admitting that the part of him he trusted most, his fierce, trained, educated will, was not enough. That was not a comfortable thing for Augustine to believe. He was a man who had built his entire early life on the power of his own mind. But here is where it gets harder. Even when he named his desires as disordered, even when he confessed them, turned from them, redirected them, the desires did not dissolve. They went somewhere, Underground, maybe, quieter, maybe, but present, he knew that. He wrote about it with a candor that still feels uncomfortable to read. He was not describing a problem he had solved. He was describing a condition he lived with. That is the wound held plainly. Not desire as sin, not desire as salvation. Desire as the thing that makes you a person, and the thing that, without help you cannot fully name or locate, will bend you quietly away from what you most want to become. Think about a moment you worked toward something for years. A relationship, a title, a place you finally belonged, and then you got it. And for a little while it was everything you thought it would be. And then quietly, without warning, the feeling moved. Not away, sideways, to the next thing. And you were left standing in your own arrival, wondering why you were already looking past it. You know that feeling, most of us do. The question is what we do with it. Do we decide we wanted the wrong thing? Do we go looking for a better version of the same thing? Or do we start to wonder whether the problem is not the object at all, but something in the wanting itself? Augustine was 32 years old when he sat in a garden in Milan and could not get up. He had wanted and achieved nearly everything a man of his time and talent could reach: a professorship, a wealthy patron, a prestigious post, an engagement to a suitable girl. And yet he was in the garden, trembling, unable to move, furious with himself. He described it later as a war inside him, not between good and evil in any simple sense, between two versions of his own will. He wanted to change. He also could not make himself change. He wrote that he was giving the order to his own hand, and his hand would not obey, except it was not his hand. It was his heart, and the heart, he had learned, does not take orders. Here is what he had already understood by the time he reached that garden. Every desire he had ever felt had pointed somewhere, not just to its object, to something beyond the object. He had wanted pleasure, and pleasure had given him moments and then withdrawn. He had wanted recognition, and recognition had felt like standing in a doorway, never quite inside. He had wanted certainty, and philosophy had given him arguments that ended in more arguments. Each desire had a shape, and the shape was always the same: a reach, a grasp, a release, and then the reach again. He began to wonder whether this was not a malfunction, whether restlessness was not the symptom of wanting wrongly but a signal, a clue. The way a compass needle trembles not because it is broken, but because it is working. That is not a resolution. That is a diagnosis. Augustine is not saying desire is the enemy. He is saying desire is the instrument. The restlessness is not the problem to be solved. It is the structure of a creature aimed at something it has not yet reached. This changes everything. If you feel hollow after the arrival, it does not mean you wanted the wrong thing. It means the thing was never large enough to hold you. Not because you are broken, because you are built for more than any single thing can give. The hollowness is not emptiness. It is direction. And he spent the rest of his life imperfectly, painfully, trying to let that direction carry him, not away from love, deeper into its source. The wreckage of his other loves was not a detour. It was, somehow, the road, though he would have been the first to tell you he would not have chosen it that way. There is a version of Augustine's story that is very clean. A man burns through his desires. He finds God. He writes it all down, and the burning, in hindsight, looks like preparation, like it had to happen exactly that way, like the wreckage was the road. But here is the hard part. When Augustine left Carthage for Rome, he did not tell his mother. Monica stood on the shore waiting to sail with him, He let her think he was saying goodbye to a friend on the boat. Then he slipped away in the night. She woke to an empty harbor. He explains this in the Confessions. He says God was using her love to hold him back. He says God led him away from her precisely by deceiving her. He frames it as providence, as necessary movement toward truth. Now stop there for a moment. You have made a choice that hurt someone who loved you. Maybe you have told yourself the story of why it had to happen, why staying would have been worse, why the pain was part of something larger. You have probably told that story more than once. Here is the question. Does the story honor the person who was left on the shore, or does it mostly serve the person who sailed away? The critic's version of Augustine is not hard to construct. He abandons a woman he lived with for over a decade. He sends her back to Africa, unnamed in his own memoir, so he can pursue a more suitable marriage. He deceives his mother on a dock. He builds a philosophy of love that places God so far above every human attachment that leaving people behind can always be reframed as spiritual progress. That is a framework, the critic says, that is very convenient. It turns every departure into devotion. It costs Augustine nothing. Augustine does not ignore this charge. He makes it himself, really. In the Confessions, he does not excuse what he did. He mourns it. He calls his own heart restless, unstable, reaching for the next thing. He does not say he was wise, he says he was driven.
The confession of evil works is the first beginning of good works.
He is saying something careful there. He is not saying that naming a wrong undoes it. He is saying that honesty is where repair begins, not resolution, not absolution, just honesty. But the critic is still standing there, because Monica did not get that honesty on the dock. The unnamed woman did not get it at all. The confession came later, in a book, after they were gone. And Augustine knows this. He does not pretend the narrative erases the cost. He sits inside the contradiction. His loves were real. The damage was real. And God, he believes, was working through both. That is either profound or it is monstrous. And the hard truth is that it might be both. Because the framework that lets Augustine make meaning out of his wreckage is the same framework that let him leave in the first place. You cannot separate the insight from the injury. They were forged together. So when you construct your own story of a painful choice, when you shape it into growth, or calling, or necessary loss, ask yourself one more time, are you honoring what it cost the other person? Or are you borrowing their suffering to build your own meaning? Augustine never fully answers that, and maybe that is the most honest thing about him. Think about the last time you wanted something badly, not a small want, a real one. Maybe it was a person, maybe it was a different life, maybe it was just a version of a Tuesday that felt like it meant something. You know the feeling. It has a kind of weight to it. It pulls. Now here is the question Augustine would ask you, not whether the desire is good or bad, not whether you should act on it, something quieter than that. He would ask, what is that desire actually pointing at? Because desire, he learned, is almost never pointing where it appears to be pointing. Try this. The next time you feel a strong desire for something, for someone, for a version of your life you do not have yet, do not act on it immediately. Do not push it away either. Just sit with it for a moment. long enough to ask one question. Is this desire pointing at the thing it appears to be pointing at, or is it pointing through that thing at something else? You are sitting with it now. What do you notice? Most of us, if we are honest, feel the desire shift slightly when we look at it directly. It becomes harder to name. The object starts to blur. You realize you are not entirely sure what you are actually after. Augustine felt this his entire life. He wanted the woman, then he wanted the philosophy, then he wanted the reputation. Each time the thing delivered something. Each time it also quietly failed to deliver the thing underneath the thing. And the wanting did not stop. It regrouped. It found a new object and started again. He came to believe that this is not a personal failure. It is the structure of human desire itself. We aim at objects, but we are always underneath, aiming at something that no object can hold. And the problem is that we cannot feel that directly. We can only feel it as a kind of disappointment that arrives just after we get what we wanted.
If thou say, "It is enough, I have reached perfection," all is lost. For it is the function of perfection to make one know one's imperfection.
That is the uncomfortable part. Augustine is not saying desire is the problem. He is saying we are not very good at reading our own desires. We think we are hungry for bread when we are actually thirsty. We keep eating and wonder why nothing helps. So let us go back to your desire. The one you are sitting with, suppose you could trace it. Suppose you followed it past the object, past the person, past the version of Tuesday you were imagining. What would you find there? Augustine would say, something that looks a great deal like longing for wholeness, for rest, for a self that is finally fully home. That sounds like a resolution. It is not, because here is what Augustine never fully solved, and neither will you. Even if you can name the deeper thing, even if you can say, yes, this is not really about the person, this is about something larger, the surface desire does not disappear. It does not politely step aside. It goes quiet for a while. Then it comes back wearing different clothes. He spent his whole life burning through desire to reach God, but the burning was real. The loves were real. The wreckage was real. You cannot separate the path from the damage done along it. And that is not a tidy lesson. That is an open wound. So the question he leaves you with is this. When you want the right thing, when you are sure of it, when it feels clean and good and honest, how do you know? How do you know the desire has been transformed and not simply disguised? How do you know you are moving toward something true and not toward the same old longing in a new coat? He did not know, not with certainty. He only knew that the question was worth living inside, that a desire examined, held up to the light, turned slowly, asked to account for itself, was at least more honest than a desire swallowed whole. It was not peace, but it was something, a kind of wakefulness. And for Augustine, that was where the whole long road had always been trying to take him. Augustine never stopped wanting things. That is the part that stays with you. He wanted God, yes, deeply, genuinely, with everything he had. But he arrived at that wanting through fire, through the woman he loved and left, through the son he could not quite be a father to, through years of chasing brilliance, pleasure, status, and finding at the bottom of each one a kind of hunger that would not close. He did not reason his way to God. He burned his way there. And the question that sits quietly at the edge of that story is this: what was doing the burning? Was it grace, slowly working through the wreckage? Was it simply a man exhausted enough to stop running? Or was the desire for God itself always already present, hiding inside all those other desires, mistaken for them, wearing their faces? He thought he knew the difference in the end. He thought the restlessness finally had a name. Maybe he was right. But you are here and you have your own list. The things you want that embarrass you. The things you want that feel clean and good. The things you cannot tell apart. You probably cannot see all the way to the bottom of any of them. Neither could he, not really. He just kept going deeper, and he wrote down what he found, and he called it confession. There is something honest about that word. Not a declaration, not an answer. A confession is something you say into the dark, not entirely sure who is listening. Augustine sat down one night with all his wanting, the beautiful mess of it, and he started to speak. He did not know where the speaking would end. Neither do you. And perhaps that is exactly where you are supposed to be right now, at the end of the day, still holding it. Still wanting something. Not yet sure what.